What's up, fiends? Alucard here. Today, I'm going to recommend some movies for you for Tubi. Alright, so all of these movies that I'm going to recommend today are available to watch for free on Tubi, Tubi. If you don't know what Tubi is, it is a free app that is available on just about every platform known to mankind. You can even pull it up on your computer, on your phone, on your TV. Wherever you normally watch movies, you can pretty much get Tubi, as long as you have an internet connection. And it is completely free. It does have a few ads, but they are not very intrusive at all. The worst I've ever had was maybe 3 commercials at once, and for a total of 1 minute and 15 seconds. Yeah, so the ads really are not very bad at all, and there's not too many either. So anyway, I'm going to get going with my suggestions here for the month of May of 2022. And yeah, so let's get going. All right, so first up, we have Basket Case from 1982, directed by Frank Henenlotter. Basically, this is the story of sort of an ordinary-looking guy in New York City and his formerly conjoined twin in a wicker basket, as you can probably see by the cover. And they are out to kill the surgeons who separated them. They don't take too kindly to that. It's a bizarre movie, but it is very fun. Next up, we have Black Roses from 1988. This one is it's one of those heavy metal horror movies. Demons hell-bent on hypnotizing the youngsters in a small town pose as a heavy metal rock band, and a mild-mannered English teacher must save the day. This is a really good 80s, cheesy 80s heavy metal horror flick. Definitely recommend it. Next up, from 1984, we have Bloodbath at the House of Death, starring Vincent Price. This is a horror comedy. It's when 6 scientists arrive at a mysterious manor to investigate eerie occurrences surrounding a massacre from years earlier, things go haywire. Yeah, this is actually a pretty funny little movie. I got privy to it a couple of years ago, and I was able to track down a copy. Yeah, I don't know if it's ever been released on DVD or anything either. Not to my knowledge, at least. But yeah, it's a very fun little movie, and if you're a Vincent Price fan, I definitely recommend it. All right, next up from 1981, we have Bloody Birthday. This is a story of 3 suburban kids that were born under a solar eclipse. They were all born at the same time, and they are actually like homicidal, evil brats. Yeah. So this is another like really fun like little slasher movie. It stars Lori Lethin, Julie Brown, the comedian, and Susan Strasberg is in this movie. I always thought that was fascinating. But the 3 kids are really good and they're really creepy. So I do recommend it. All right, next up we have from 1980, City of the Living Dead, directed by Lucio Fulci. This one stars Christopher George and Janet Agron. This one is about a reporter and a psychic racing to save humanity and close the 7 gates of hell. So it's a Fulci zombie movie, part of the Gates of Hell trilogy. Yeah. So I mean that's kind of all I have to say. Fulci's the master of this stuff, and yeah, I highly recommend all of his zombie movies. They're all fantastic, including this one. And up next, I have another slasher for you from 2012. This one is called Creep Van. This one is about a 20-something-year-old slacker who gets caught up in a deadly game of cat and mouse after answering a for sale sign placed on a dilapidated van. Despite the kind of silly title, this movie's way better than you think it is. I do recommend it, especially if you like slasher type movies. All right, speaking of slasher type movies, this is also a recommendation from 1980. I recommend Don't Go in the House. This movie is about a guy named Donnie who's he was burned as a child by his crazy ass mother, and basically he starts stalking all these women with like a flamethrower. Yeah, he like hallucinates things, and oh, it's quite a movie. It really is, and it was one of the video nasties, back in the day. Be a really really interesting take on some things in this movie. So definitely check this one out. It is a classic. It's called Don't Go in the House. All right, next up we have from 2007, Ed Gein, The Butcher of Plainfield. Now this movie is about, of course, the notorious serial killer Ed Gein, who terrorized rural Wisconsin in the 1950s. And Ed Gein in this movie is played by Kane Hodder, who's best known for playing Jason Voorhees and Victor Crowley from the Hatchet series. So yeah, if you want to see Kane Hodder actually acting with lines, and he's full on acting. Like this is not a Jason movie at all. This is definitely a kind of a, I wouldn't say a biopic, but it's definitely a movie about Ed Gein. And I actually think this is probably his best performance. Kane really kills it in this movie. Um, and like I said, if you like true crime type things, or if you're just a fan of Kane Hodder, you'll definitely like this one. All right, next up might surprise some people because most people know that I'm not a big fan of remakes, but this is an exception. From 2013, I recommend Evil Dead. Yep, the Evil Dead remake is absolutely one of the best remakes I've ever seen. Um, it is an update to the 1981 Evil Dead, which is also on Tubi, by the way. So you can check out the original as well. It's basically about friends getting to a cabin, and a curse is unlocked from a book that they find. This is the Fede Alvarez version, of course, with Jane Levy and Shiloh Fernandez. Um, very, very great remake. And I do not say that lightly, as I'm sure a lot of you know. Um, and one of the bloodiest endings I've ever seen in a movie. Super cool. All right, next up we have from 2005, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. This movie is directed by Scott Derrickson and stars Laura Linney and Jennifer Carpenter. This was the first time I ever saw Jennifer Carpenter in anything, and she kind of freaked me out in this movie. It's based on a true story of a lawyer's defense of a priest charged with killing a demonically possessed girl. And Jennifer Carpenter contorts her body, and it's something else. It's yeah. If you haven't seen this one, definitely check it out. All right, I have another slasher for you from 2018. I have Hellfest. This one is basically about a serial killer at a Halloween theme park. Yep. I mean, can't get more basic than that. However, this one really works. This is another one that I think went under a lot of people's radar, and just they didn't check it out. But Hellfest is a fun little ride, pun intended. Uh, but yeah, check it out. Hellfest, really cool little slasher flick. All right, next up we have from 1991, Highway to Hell, starring Patrick Bergin, Chad Lowe, and Christy Swanson. This one is about two newlyweds that have their honeymoon ruined when the bride is abducted by the cop from hell. Um, Basically, the groom now has 24 hours to rescue his lovely bride, so he has to go to hell to get her. Yeah, this is another like really fun one. It doesn't take itself seriously at all, but the hell cop is really cool looking, and Yeah, it's a fun little movie. So if you're in the mood for just a fun little crazy romp, this is a good one for you. All right, and another, I guess you could call this a slasher. From 1980, we have Maniac, uh, directed by Bill Lustig, stars Joe Spinell and Carolyn Monroe. Yeah, this is about he's a disturbed serial killer. He prowls the streets of New York City and to slaughter people, young women in particular, and he sort of begins a relationship with a beautiful photographer played by Carolyn Monroe. Joe Spinell is a madman in this movie. He just rips it up, and he is menacing in this movie. And this is another one. It's not for the faint of heart for sure, um, but it's very good and definitely highly recommended, especially if you like the slasher genre. For the next one, we're going to head over to France, and we're going to talk about 2008's Martyrs. This one is directed by Pascal Laugier and stars a bunch of French people whose names I would probably butcher, so I'm not going to go that way. Let me tell you about it first, then I'll tell you my thoughts. So this one is about 15 years after escaping her captors in an abandoned slaughterhouse. Lucy's revenge plot takes her on a terrifying journey of her own depravity. So this one, I saw this one a few years back, and I absolutely loved it. This one is very divisive. I know some people that cannot stand this one. Um, I will warn you that this one is probably the most graphic one that I'm recommending here today. It is one part of the French New Extremity movement of horror movies, kind of in the late 2000s. Um, but yeah, this movie actually fascinated me for a little while, and it's one of the most interesting uh, twists, I guess you could say, on this particular topic. Now, I know the description doesn't really give too much away, but yeah, if you want a really intense thriller that kind of turns into something else, uh, highly recommend it. And make sure you watch the French version, not the awful American version. The awful American version is on Tubi as well, but please stay away from that one. The one you're looking for is from 2008, directed by Pascal Laugier. Next up, we have from 1980 the horror comedy Motel Hell, starring Rory Calhoun and Nancy Parson. Yeah, this one's a hoot. It's a horror comedy. It's about a sheriff discovering that his siblings kidnapped their motel guest, and then they grind them up in order to make their famous sausages. Yeah, it's a very dark comedy, but again, it's very fun. It's not very graphic at all. Um, and the killer guy has a pig head, like as a mask, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's definitely this is one of those must really, especially if you like horror comedy. Um, yeah, definitely recommended. Motel Hell. And most of y'all also know that I love silent movies, so I'm only going to recommend one this time. But from 1925, I'm going to recommend The Phantom of the Opera, starring Lon Chaney and Mary Philbin. Yeah, it's a mad, disfigured composer seeks love with a lovely young opera singer. I mean, if you haven't seen this, just watch it. It's just an absolute classic. Lon Chaney, the man of a thousand faces and more. I mean, Lon Chaney is the best silent film actor. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, so check out The Phantom of the Opera. Even if you don't like silent movies, you may like this one because this one is very is different. All right, next up from 1982, we have Pieces, directed by Juan Pique Simon, and stars Christopher George and Linda Day George. The co-eds of a Boston college campus are targeted by a mysterious killer who is creating a human jigsaw puzzle from their body parts. And there's a couple of taglines for this movie that are just fantastic. Like, as you can probably see on the poster, you don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre. And the other one that I love is at the bottom. It says, "It's exactly what you think it is." Yeah, this is one of those like quintessential uh, slasher flicks. It's fairly graphic, and it's real bloody. It kind of has everything you want in a slasher movie. Put it that way. All right, so next up from 1987, we have Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. This is my favorite Prom Night movie out of the four. Well, five if you count the remake. Because this one's a little bit different. It has nothing to do with the first one. This one's about a prom queen's tortured spirit rising to get revenge against the boyfriend responsible for her fiery death. And of course, he is now the high school principal. So it's really interesting because they add. The first movie was more of a straight slasher, I guess you could say. This one is definitely more supernatural, and they definitely play with it. And but it's still a slasher. So there you go. But yeah, I do recommend Prom Night 2. If you like the first one, especially, I do recommend this one. All right, next up from 1979, we have the TV miniseries Salem's Lot, directed by Toby Hooper and starring David Soul and James Mason. So this one is about a novelist returning to his hometown to write about a mysterious mansion that has intrigued him since childhood. Um, this is a really good miniseries from the late 70s. It's altogether it's about 3 hours long, but as you're watching it, it will not seem that long. I promise you. And this is one of those crazy like vampire movies. With the vampire that kind of looks like Nosferatu kind of deal. But yeah, definitely if you've not seen it, it's an absolute classic, especially for a TV movie. So go ahead and check that out, Salem's Lot. Next up, I have a documentary for you from 2001 called Schlock, The Secret History of American Movies. This one is about rare exploitation film clips and interviews, offering an historical glimpse into the golden age of the drive-in theater where forbidden material was king. They interview all kinds of people in this movie, including Vampira, uh, Peter Bogdanovich, Roger Corman, Dick Miller, um, John Landis, all kind of people. And it's really fascinating look, especially if you like these types of movies. Um, yeah, this documentary is a must, and it was hard to find for a little while, so I'm pretty glad that Tubi put it up. Next up, from 1971, I have The Shiver of the Vampires, directed by Jean Rollin. This is one of those like erotic vampire flicks by Jean Rollin, if you're familiar with him. This movie follows some newlyweds who travel to an ancient chateau in France, only to find it to be inhabited by vampires. Um, I like the Jean Rollin movies. They're all kind of weird and surreal and, kind of mystical, and there's some violence, and they're all like very weird and esoteric, and yeah, but sometimes I'm in the mood for that. This is not my favorite Jean Rollin movie, but it's a definitely very good one. Next up, from 1997, I have a sci-fi action movie for you called Starship Troopers, directed by Paul Verhoeven. It stars Casper Van Dien, Denise Richards, Dina Meyer, Neil Patrick Harris, Jake Busey, Rue McClanahan's in it. I mean, all kind of people are in this. This was a pretty big movie. It's a sci-fi splatter movie about a military crew forced into intergalactic war against a relentless and violent like alien bug species. Yeah, it's based on a Robert Heinlein book. I know a few people that love the book and can't stand the movie. I know people that like both because they're a bit different from each other, the book and the movie. Um, I like both. I there are kind of two different things, but with the same background. But yeah, I thought this was a fun little movie. It's not the greatest acted or anything, but it's just a fun little let's fight some bugs, type of thing. All right, so for the next one, we're going back to TV movies. From 1978, we have Wes Craven's Summer of Fear, starring Linda Blair and Fran Drescher. Yes, right, the nanny. She's up in this one. This one is following a tragedy. A family welcomes in their relative, but their teen daughter suspects that the young woman has witchcraft on her agenda. Yeah, this is a nice little TV movie too. This was after Wes Craven did Last House on the Left, but before he did Nightmare on Elm Street. So this is kind of right in the middle. And I think Linda Blair did a pretty good job in this one. All right, next up, I do have something a little bit different for you. This is more of a action thriller type thing, and this one is from 1985. It's called Tenement: Game of Survival, directed by Roberta Findlay. This is about a gang of ruthless criminals seeking revenge on an unsuspecting building full of Bronx tenants, leading to a full-on bloody battle for survival. I caught this one day on one of the Roku channels that I watch, and yeah, this is actually a really interesting little B movie here. So if you want something a little bit different, check this one out, Tenement: Game of Survival. All right, let's go Giallo for the next one. From 1970, we have The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, directed by Dario Argento. This is his very first theatrical movie. Yeah, so this one is about after witnessing the attempted murder of a Rome art gallery owner, an American writer and his girlfriend investigate as they're trailed by the killer. This is a really good little movie here. This is the best era of Dario Argento. The first, the first decade of Argento to me is like the prime stuff. So from yeah, this one came out in 1970s. So from 1970 to really about the mid 80s, Argento just released a bevy of really good giallo flicks, and this was the very first one. So yeah, check this one out. All right, we're heading back to Slasherville. For 1981, we have The Prowler, directed by Joseph Zito, who was to be the director of Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. This one is about a group of college kids preparing for their graduation party, but a maniacal serial killer dressed in military fatigues spoil their plans. Yeah, this is another really good slasher flick. It's also called Rosemary's Killer as an alternate title. Um, but yeah, the look of the killer is really unique in this one, and he uses there's a scene, a very iconic scene with a pitchfork um, in it that is definitely a must see. How about a little sci-fi horror for you? This time from 1979, we're going to talk The Visitor. This one stars Mel Ferrer, Glenn Ford, Lance Henriksen, and John Huston. This one's about the soul of a demonic 8-year-old girl with telekinetic powers becomes the pawn in an intergalactic tug of war between the forces of good and evil. Yeah, I caught this one on a Roku channel one day too, and I immediately got drawn in by it, by the little girl. And yeah, this is another like a really interesting, really trippy type of thing. So if you're in the mood for a little sci-fi twist with stuff with some horror stuff, with some horror elements, check this one out. You'll probably like it. How about an anthology movie this time? From 1990, we have The Willies, starring Sean Astin. This one is about a night in the woods. 3 schoolboys take turns around the campfire spinning yarns about a chicken fried rat, huge flies, and a bathroom monster. Yeah, so this one's a fun little kind of like a PG-13 type anthology horror movie. and it even has Donkey Lips from Salute Your Shorts in it. All right, next up we have one of my favorite directors, John Carpenter, in 1998's Vampires. This one stars James Woods, Cheryl Lee, Daniel Baldwin, and Thomas Ian Griffith from The Karate Kid 3. When his team is decimated, the leader of a relentless group of mercenary vampire slayers break all the rules to acquire an ancient Catholic relic. Yeah, this one is really cool. Thomas Ian Griffith is awesome as the main vampire. Um, James Woods is a really good kind of like anti-hero kind of deal. And like I said, and it's directed by the man himself, John Carpenter. To me, this was really his last like really kind of great movie. After this, his stuff kind of fell off a little bit, but this is the kind of like the end of the awesome John Carpenter era. And I'm gonna have another, I guess, mainstream movie, you would say. This is from 1994. It's called Wolf, starring Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer. Also has James Spader, Richard Jenkins, Christopher Plummer, a few other people in this movie as well. After a Manhattan book editor is bitten by a wolf, he starts experiencing emotional and physical changes, and not necessarily for the better. Yeah, this is Jack Nicholson as the Wolfman, basically. Except, it's a different story, but it's, that's basically what this is. And so if you like Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer, you're going to love this movie. But my last recommendation is truly the scariest movie on this list. From 2006, I'm recommending Idiocracy. Yeah, if you really think about it, this really is the scariest one on this list. It's directed by Mike Judge, best known for Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill. It stars Luke Wilson, Maya Rudolph, Dax Shepard, and Terry Crews. And it's about when a less than average Army private awakens from a cryogenic freeze in the year 2515. He finds that he is now the smartest man on Earth. Everyone has gotten dumbed down, and I mean, it's definitely, it's a comedy, but it's kind of scary because it's not that far off. And this came out in 2006, so like, yeah, Mike Judge knew. Mike Judge knew what was happening. But yeah, definitely recommend it. If you want some laughs, this is a good one. And like I said, also if you look at it in a different way, it can be quite scary. So yeah, that's. So anyway, I hope you like my recommendations today. If you do, give me a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And if you're new around here, please subscribe. I will check all you guys later. Let me know in the comments if you've seen any of these movies or if you want to see any of these movies. I'd love to talk with you about them. So yeah, I will see all you guys next time. Remember to stay spooky. I'll see you guys later. Peace.